Right. Let's jump into the mimer. So we just started to get into the difference between the nefesh habahamis, the animal soul, and the Yetzer Hara. So so we were saying that another example in the and I believe these are characteristics that could even be found in the nefesh habahamis. So in the nefesh habahamis, the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya that there are good qualities in the nefesh habahamis. So we have the teva, whatever we're doing that is according to our nature, that comes naturally to us, could also be coming from our nefesh habahamis. So, for instance, if you give charity, you see somebody suffering, and you give charity because it makes you feel good, right? Which is a good thing, right? That is coming from your nefesh habahamis. That's coming from your animal soul. And as the Alter Rebbe says, that the Jewish people are naturally rachmanim, gomlei chasadim, and baishanim. That we are, this is from the Talmud, that we are naturally people who want to do good, and we are rachmanim, we take mercy on others. So when we're doing such a thing, and you're giving charity to somebody because you want to, because you want to feel good, that's not a horrible thing, is it? Right? It's just not we're not going beyond ourselves, right? So maybe we're giving the amount that we feel comfortable to give. Giving the amount that we don't feel comfortable to give, now we're accessing the divine soul, right? Making ourselves uncomfortable in the service of Hashem. It's a complicated area. Now, when you give charity, could you say that somebody needs help and you help them out? Could you call that your Yetzer Hara? No, certainly not. It's not your evil inclination. But it is your nefesh habahamis. And so in this way, we see a little bit of a difference between the two. So the nefesh habahamis is called the animal soul, but it's kind of the regular guy, the ordinary guy, as opposed to the extraordinary guy. Who is the extraordinary guy? The extraordinary guy is the one who goes beyond what he feels comfortable doing, beyond his limits. And this is this is a whole different quality. But let's see it in the words of the Rebbe, of the Frierdiker Rebbe. So another example, the pleasure one takes in displaying good character by doing charity with someone who needs. You see, it's a very interesting description here. He takes pleasure in displaying good character. Like I oftentimes tell my wife, I said, we don't want to set the table with that because I don't like to appear cheap. Says, I am cheap, but I don't like to appear cheap, right? So it's like, not necessarily do I have the good character, but I like to display the good character. We like to display the better parts of ourselves, which isn't, again, it's not the Yetzer Hara so much. So a person takes pleasure in displaying good character by doing charity with someone who needs, right? So we see oftentimes at a banquet, someone's being honored for giving thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds and thousands of dollars, and everyone's making a whole big award ceremony around them, and the whole everyone's coming together to honor them and to and the Rebbe would always encourage people to do that. And there are some people who would even do that, even though it was very painful for them.
Rabbi, it's Panina Sarah. Can you hear me? Rabbi?
Yes, but you know what, Panina, why don't you wait until we finish this paragraph, okay? Then I'd love to hear what your comment on it, okay?
I just thought it was Benoni.
Okay. Oh, well. Go ahead.
I just thought that what difference would that be between that and the Benoni, the normal guy?
Okay, the Beinoni, according to Chassidus and Tanya, is anything but normal.
Oh,
The Beinoni, although the name is very misleading. A Beinoni does not mean your average guy, although that's exactly what you would think, and that's how the word is probably used in Hebrew. And Bain means between. He's between this and he's between that. The Alter Rebbe's description of a Beinoni is something entirely different. You've studied a little Tanya, Panina?
not to know about this. Not
Okay.
enough of that.
This is in the beginning of the first chapters of Tanya. The Alter Rebbe explains that a Beinoni is totally misunderstood. And so when we usually use the terminology of Beinoni, we're talking about the Beinoni of Tanya. The Beinoni of Tanya is a person who, like me and you, desires to sin from time to time, but he never does. He or she always controls their impulse to sin in thought, speech, and action. Wow. In other words, it's a person that would look like a tzaddik to the average onlooker, right? But he's not, because he wants to sin, but he overcomes that impulse. And so his life is a struggle, but he always prevails. So here we're talking about a person who takes pleasure in displaying good character by doing charity with someone who needs, and in general, to love one's fellow and seek welfare of a fellow person, even someone who one does not know. This is simply human character, to love God's creations, and to help one who suffers. God spare us by comforting him and encouraging him. As we see with our very own eyes that there are many people who take great pleasure in these humane acts. They do kindness despite entailing bodily efforts on behalf of another, often straining themselves to benefit him. All of the above, despite them being delightful physically, yet they come from the spirituality of the soul and its virtuous character. The animalistic soul, however, although it too contains intellect, which is the difference between the evil inclination and the animalistic soul. That is, the evil inclination is passionate feelings being the picture that one has in one's mind of how the matter could be achieved. There are such visualizations that are good. They are the good inclination, the good feelings and traits of the godly soul. The bad visualizations are the evil inclination, the Yetzer Hara. That is the bad feelings of the animalistic soul. And this is the definition of Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. Yetzer, meaning inclination, is a form of the word siur. The word Yetzer and siur are related, which means a visualization. It's a formation. Hence, evil inclination is evil visualization. What do you think the Frierdiker Rebbe means by this? Evil visualization.
Rabbi, could it be someone fantasizing satisfaction from doing something evil?
Perhaps. Yeah, could be. That's a good guess. So feelings, although primarily something which relate to another subject or object, for example, a kind feeling or a severe feeling which specifically exists when there is another with whom to do kindness or to become severe to, whereas within oneself this is not feasible. In other words, feelings, Chassidus explains, an emotion is about something towards the outside. You have a feeling towards something or someone. So you have a feeling of love, and that love is going to be projected to the outside, or a feeling of being afraid of something. And that's also something projected of something you're afraid of, something outside of you. This is what it states regarding Avraham in the verse. He sat in the tent's doorway in the heat of the day, meaning that he was pained by the fact that there were no guests coming, someone with whom to do kindness. So we're saying here that Abraham represented the midah, the quality of kindness, but nevertheless, if nobody came to his house, he could do nothing with that quality of kindness. That's underscoring the idea that in order to actualize the midah, the quality, the emotion, the feeling, you need another person. So he was anticipating people coming to visit him at the tent. He was sitting at the doorway, hoping the guests would come so that he could act on that feeling. Avram was of a generous spirit. We see here then that feelings are primarily directed towards another. Okay, and Chassidus explains this in distinction to intellect. Right? Intellect is how we think about something in our mind. We don't need another person to analyze, to think, to toss something around in our mind, to meditate upon it, and to take it one way or another. And that might have to do with the visualizations. However, this is in reference to the actualization of a feeling. It is feasible only with another, but the visualizations involved in feelings are feasible even within oneself as well. So the Yetzer Hara could be operating without anybody else, and we can visualize a certain negative thing that we desire to do, as Penina Sarah suggested. We don't need another person to actually have the visualization. Truthfully, this visualization found in bad character traits and bad behaviors is evil and sickness incorporated into the nature of many people, expressed in various and bizarre issues. This is the proverbial evil thoughts, which are actually visualizations, that a person pictures himself in various matters as if he's actually doing them. These thoughts are very harsh and evil, and as in the saying of our rabbis of blessed memory in Yuma, that thoughts of sin, it says in the Talmud that thoughts of sin are even worse than the sin themselves. Here, the Rebbe is talking. I mean, here I think we are clearly talking about lustful thoughts. So, in lustful thoughts, one could actually visualize and imagine themselves. Right? It's basically fantasizing. Right? That's the English word that we would use. In which, of course, a person is found in that fantasy, and that's what he's saying. And these thoughts, these lustful thoughts, are fantasizing. These are even worse than doing the sin. I mean, what does that mean? That thinking about adultery and thinking about being with a person, that would be worse than actually doing it? Not exactly, but the point of the Talmud is that the thoughts can become all-encompassing. The thoughts can take a person from the land of the living to basically being totally consumed by these negative, lustful thoughts. And this is all the Yetzer Hara. This is all the visualization. So this type of visualization, I think we can all understand clearly what this is referring to. This is called a permissive heart, wherein he allows his heart to sync itself with his mind and his imagination in base and coarse matters. He lives in this visualization as if it were actual. Besides the fact that in this way he destroys, God spare us, all the faculties and vitality of his soul. Basically, sucks out your ability to appreciate God. It sucks out the ability of your soul to feel, to have any sensitivity of godliness. Moreover, he destroys all the faculties of his body until he comes to God spare us to have a disturbed mind. This is the cause for many bad illnesses in many people in general, and specifically in the young, that they become. This is quite a discourse on the whole issue and problem of a pervasive problem, and even before the internet. Even before the internet, right? The Alter Rebbe also talks about this in Tanya, right? And it's spoken about in the Talmud. And this is clearly an issue and a problem that human beings have. And it can lead, when it goes unchecked, it can lead to basically what the Frierdiker Rebbe says here is that it can lead to mental illness. All of this is the effect of the evil inclination, which is primarily feelings. Okay, but he was saying above that it's the visualization, but it's the feelings associated, I guess, with the visualizations. So the animalistic soul, however, is primarily intellectual. So the soul, it's interesting, even in the etymology of the word soul, is the psyche, which is really one's psychology, one's mind. And this is what the Alter Rebbe is saying here, is that the soul is primarily intellectual. Intellectual doesn't mean like we use the word, oh, he was an intellectual, but it's involved with matters of what we know. We'll see, he'll describe here, he'll explain it. However, its entire intellect is in the materialistic, within the physical, as it is named, animalistic soul, so it is. It is sunk specifically into materialistic matters to take pleasure in them and to conceptualize and think how to arrive at fulfilling his desire, as well as to claim all sorts of claims merely to benefit his materialistic self. So we see a little bit of a difference here. So the Rebbe is saying here that the fantasies that lustful fantasies would be more connected in the domain of the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, and that's about thinking about something that's going to make you feel a certain way. Whereas the animal soul is thinking, okay, maybe how would I get to the red light district? How would I find somebody with whom to sin, right? So the figuring out of how to do the sin, that's the intellect of
Rabbi,
the animal soul. Do we get well, in a moment, Moshe. Are we getting this is the distinction he's making here. Yes, please, Moshe.
Esau, could we say this about Esau in general? Because Esau indulged in all these things. He was involved with Gashmiut. I mean, we could actually say a society that follows Esau, the Edomite world is basically sick and diseased because that's a society that indulges in sexual activities, thoughts, as well as in Gashmiut.
Right.
The whole society is diseased, basically.
I don't see why not.
The society we're living in, basically, as Yehudim, we're living in a society. We're living in Edom, which is basically a diseased society, which indulges in Gashmiut and sexual, thoughts and actions.
Right. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. And here, there's so many different countries that you could associate this with, because it is, again, it's part of human nature. I mean, it's a difficult thing. The question is, how does each society decide to deal with this human nature is the question, right? And so some come to the conclusion that we should rejoice in it. We should celebrate it. We shouldn't and some feel no, it needs to be, it needs to be in a particular context. In the context of marriage, it becomes a holy thing, right? But it's altogether, it's a very it's a tough nut to crack, really, because clearly this is the way Hashem made us. I mean, this goes back to a story in the Gemara in Sanhedrin, I think Samech on page 64 or so, where the Jewish people, when they came back to rebuild the second temple, they came back with Ezra, Nehemiah, Daniel, Mordechai, all of these names of the second temple era. They rebuilt the temple, and basically the sin for which the first temple was destroyed was idolatry. The Jewish people were immersed in idolatry. It was all the rage, really, in a way that we cannot understand it. And the analogy that I give to it is today would be sports. People and their sports teams. I'm not saying that following sports is idolatry. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm just saying how we could see the idea of irrationally going crazy over something, even to becoming a different person over something that's really nothing, right? People like to talk about their team, right? How is it your team exactly? Do you have stock? You own part of it? No. So how is it you train them? They're them? They're your team. And not only are they your team, you would come to fisticuffs. You would come to fighting to defend your team, right? I mean, not your average person, but your avid fan would become a whole different person, right? So I use that as an analogy to understand Avodah Zarah. That's just an analogy. Again, I don't mean to compare the two, but just in terms of something totally an irrational kind of being drawn after something. This was all the rage. And this was, there's no question that during the first temple period, and there's many stories in the Talmud talking about this, even the king Menashe, who was, one of the worst kings from the house of David, who got the Jews so immersed in idol worship. And believe it or not, he was the son or grandson, I think son of Chizkiah, of one of the most righteous kings. But yet he came to one of the sages of the Talmud in a dream and said that had you lived in my era, you would have run after idol worship even more than me. So you don't understand the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination to we don't get it, right? We don't understand it, but it's a big thing. Anyway, this is a side point. My point is that at the beginning of the second temple, they made this great prayer to God and said, God, please take away our desire for Yetzer Hara. Take away our Yetzer Hara, our evil inclination for idol worship. And guess what? They offered a sacrifice, and a big flame went upward, and the desire, the evil inclination for idol worship was, let us say, if not eliminated, extremely compromised. And you don't find in the second temple, you don't find that idol worship was the problem. Then, while the Jewish people were at it, they said, oh, well, let's get rid of our desire, our Yetzer Hara, for lustful thoughts and for thinking, right, of having lustful thoughts. And they went and they brought a sacrifice, and it was offered, and they made an offering, and God took away their desire for lustful thoughts. And as the Talmud puts it, not one egg was laid that entire week. Meaning, once people had no lust within them, they could also not procreate, right? There was no ability to procreate. So this is altogether, it's a very interesting thing that Hashem has put within us and given us the challenge to deal with it. But we know that I mean, it's a crazy kind of thing that that people have to deal with and societies have to deal with. But again, there are societies that celebrate it, and then there are societies that have put great cautions around it. Anyway, moving on to the animal soul. So the animal soul is basically the architect of evil, of thinking of how to get and achieve the negative things that I want, that I desire. So all this are the bad diseases of Egypt, which are great illnesses. So it's God had said that all the illness that I put upon Egypt, I shall not put upon you. So what are these great illnesses? These are the great illnesses, I guess, both of the evil inclination, the Yetzer Hara, and the animal soul, which is the architect of the evil. Every illness, God spare us, causes many types of ills. There are many opinions as to what are the general illnesses. As our rabbis of blessed memory said in Baba Metzia, Rav said, this is the eye. A negative eye is a general illness that brings many different ills. Ayin Ra'ah. So a bad eye is a general illness which brings, God spare us, many problems, heaven forbid. So what is a negative eye? A negative eye is an eye which is always seeing the bad in others. And when it sees that somebody else has something, it wants it, right? Why do they have it? Why don't I have it, right? Why did they win the lottery ticket and I didn't? You didn't even buy a ticket, right? That's how crazy the negative eye is, the ayin ra'ah. A negative eye comes mainly from jealousy and self-love. For someone who loves himself much more than moderately, desires everything, and is jealous of every person. What the other has is too much, and he himself needs everything, and everything is not enough for him. So here we have the idea of a negative eye, and the illnesses that we're talking about here are mostly psychological or mental illnesses. This is what we're talking about, that a person ending up. So a person living a miserable life because they look at everything in a miserable way, because they have the ayin ra. Shmuel said, this is a draft. I'm not sure what the Hebrew is. I'd have to look it up in the Mimer, but this is, again, from the Gemara in Baba Metzia. Generally, this refers...
It's ruach.
Ruach.
Wind.
Wind, okay. So generally, this is what the Alter Rebbe explains in chapter 1 of Tanya. So the Alter Rebbe in the first chapter of Tanya talks about wind, fire, earth, and water, and how these four elements of earth, water, wind, and fire are the four elements, each comprising different various negative attributes of the animal soul. So what is ruach, wind, normally translated as wind or draft in this in this draft of the discourse? So he says in chapter 1, that's going to be silliness, scoffing jokingly, pride, and idle talk come from the element of wind. All these things are matters that have no substance to them. Therefore, one who is on the level of being a person shall distance himself from them by his virtue of humanity. We see this with our own eyes, that these light matters which have no substance are specifically what coarsens people very much, right? A person could look and say, well, silliness, scoffing, pride, and idle talk, right? No harm done. It's a victimless crime. What's the problem? So the Rebbe says is that living such a life where we are preoccupied with such things coarsen the person and destroy his entire character. Even one who is a person of skill and talent, if he acts silly and jokes with abandon, engages in idle talk and pride, his whole character is lost.
Rabbi?
Yes, please.
Okay, we know that shtus is something that can destroy a person. But let's say a comedian, a Jewish comedian like Jackie Mason. He goes on stage, he's a rabbi, and he's going before an audience, and he's just talking a lot of shtus, basically, but he's making a point, though, through that. So there could be, in the essence of shtus, there could be important information in that, Even, it seems that way, I mean, even through joking and comical behavior, there could be an essence of importance within that.
All right. So is the Frierdiker Rebbe saying here that one should have no humor whatsoever?
So somebody like Jackie Mason, you're saying, is wasting his time going before an audience.
First of all, let's start from the beginning. I want to go step by step. Is the Rebbe? I'm asking a question. Is the Rebbe saying here that one should have no humor whatsoever? Is he advocating that?
I don't know. I'm asking you.
Right. He's not saying that. He's saying that becomes a person's whole life and whole endeavor. I'm going to share with you a Gemara, a very amazing Gemara. Let's see, I'm not finding it here. I've got to remember. I thought it was Hani Trey Badchi. Anyway, I can't find the exact Gemara. It's in Chagiga, I believe, or Tainus. It's a story about one of the sages of the Talmud asking Eliyahu, who in this marketplace is a ben olam haba, who is getting the world to come, who's going to be deserving to go to the world to come. He points out different people for different reasons, and he points to these two guys, and he says, why are they? There were two guys who were joking around with people. They were Hani Trey Badchi. They were, two jokers, basically, comedians. He said, why are they going to the Olam Haba? He says, because when they see that somebody is sad, they go over and cheer them up and tell them jokes. And because of this, these two individuals merit the world to come, like the immediate world to come. It's such a high endeavor. So clearly, humor has its place. There is no question. I'm not going to comment about a particular comic. I don't, but let me say theoretically, you could have comedy, kosher comedy. There is a possibility for kosher comedy, meaning there's no lashon hara, of course, right? You're not making fun of somebody. You're not demeaning the Torah or another human being, right? So there is kosher comedy. There's certainly kosher jokes. There's no question about it. And not only are they good, they're very good. They're very good. And Rava, before he would give his class, he would tell a joke, and the students would laugh, and then he would tell the joke. The Alter Rebbe says in Tanya that in that way he used humor to open up people's minds, because we know that humor, when you hear a funny joke, it's mind expanding. It's expansive. So there's no question that humor has its place. He's talking here about people that's their whole life. Their whole life is a joke. As far as comedians are concerned, they have another reason to tell a joke. They're earning a living. This is how they're supporting their family, right? That's another benefit. But again, that doesn't permit saying jokes that would be prohibited. But with permissible jokes, of course, they're earning a livelihood, and there's nothing evil about humor. There's no question whatsoever. He's talking about people that their whole life is making a joke of everything. Here, amazing humor has got this amazing ability to remove the heaviness of the situation. So when a person has a heavy situation on their mind in a negative kind of a way, humor can make it lighter. So now they can be a happier person, a better person, a kinder person. What if a person has is in a serious moment of their life of serious connection, right? Then you don't want humor. You understand? Humor can be used. I'm saying I'm talking only about permissible humor, of course, but even humor, sometimes a person just jokes about everything, and that becomes a coping mechanism. They can't absorb any serious idea without making a joke about it. You know what I'm talking about? I'm sure you've seen this. I've been guilty of this myself at times when I just couldn't handle it. I just joke around about it and make light of it. So sometimes making light of life is a perfect thing to do, and sometimes it's not. So it's again just questions. It's just a question of how it's utilized. Do you agree, Moshe? Disagree?
Yes, I understand.
And the Rebbe here is not saying anything other than that. The previous Rebbe definitely had a sense of humor. I'm not saying that because I'd like him to have a sense of humor. It's reported.
Rabbi, this is Dana Sarah. I was just thinking over, this satire program that comes from Israel. It's really brilliant, and it does lighten the mood of which would otherwise be quite, in some ways tragic. But at the same time, it puts by the satire, it emphasizes certain points in such a way that it gets a point across.
Right.
And it's funny.
Right. Sometimes, like Reader's Digest says, right? Laughter is the best medicine. So there's no question that there could be a very good application to joking. So the story is told that the Rebbe's secretary, I think his name was Chani Morozov, if I'm not mistaken. So when he would see that the Rebbe was in a very serious, the previous Rebbe would be in a very serious mood, and he would try to lift him up a little bit, elevate him, which the previous Rebbe had a lot to be in a serious mood about through communist Russia, and then the Holocaust, and then coming to America that was totally cold to the idea of Yiddishkeit, right? It was he had plenty to be serious about, but he was a person of good humor. His pictures do not belie the truth of his character. You see pictures of the previous Rebbe, everybody assumes that the previous Rebbe was like a very serious kind of a person. Obviously, I mean, he came after a stroke, and his certain muscles of his mouth he wasn't using in the normal way, and we see all of the serious pictures, but it's reported that the previous Rebbe had a sense of humor. He was definitely a person who was a person with a sense of humor.
I have a picture of him with a big smile.
There is one picture of him with smiling, right? Laughing, kind of.
Right. We have that.
So Chani Morozov, one time the previous Rebbe said, please give me a pencil. And he brought him a pencil that was like a little tiny pencil. And he said, you expect me to write with this? Give me a bigger pencil. So he had like a giant joke pencil. He said, oh, okay, here's this one. And he got a laugh out of the Frierdiker Rebbe, right? But, so again, is there a way to use humor in a kosher way? Yes, not only that, these two guys, because they used it in a proper way, they become B'nai Olam Haba. They now receive their portion of the world to come. Wow, just through humor. Now, I will tell you, seldom are you going to listen to a comic who's doing really kosher humor. So I'm not like I'm not an advocate that, I'm not saying that these, it's a hard area. No, obviously no coarse language or, topics that shouldn't be, that are the opposite of modesty, right? Or, but there are still plenty of things that could be very funny, and there are comics who who do it, and whatever, people will oftentimes go and listen to comedy, I myself included. And it's great. Now, what if it's time when you should be davening or should be learning? Of course not, right? But there's a time when a little bit of humor is very good to pick up one's life. All right. Back to the mimer. So you see here, if he acts silly and jokes with abandon, right? In other words, he's not thinking about what he's saying. He's making a joke of everything, right? So using a joke in a specific way to lift up people's spirits, that's a very good thing, right? And which rabbi doesn't start a sermon with a joke? So the illness of wind, so here again, we're talking about ruach. With regard to character traits, it's a willy-nilly person who has no foundation and establishment for himself. He is turned around by circumstances. Okay, so this is the person described in the Talmud as ruach, right? Ruach is the illness that befalls a person, and it's a person who has no gravitas, right? He's turned around by the wind, any which direction. The wind blows him this way or that. Depends which way the wind is blowing, right? Rabbi Hanina has another opinion. This is going back to the Talmud. These are all quotes from the Talmud of the different rabbis referring to different things that were the illness that would be placed on people. So Rabbi Hanina said, this is the cold. General illness is the cold. A healthy person has his blood flowing in an orderly fashion as is necessary. This causes warmth, and warmth is vitality. However, if the blood flow is not as is necessary, then the warmth intensifies and he falls ill. The warmth intensifies. I would question if maybe just the opposite. Again, I'd have to see it in the, maybe because he has a fever. I'm not sure. Could be. But either way, we know that having the right temperature, this is very important. So then the warmth intensifies and he falls ill. The beginning of the illness is coldness. So it is with regard to spirituality that the beginning of illness and its cause is coldness, being cold. This is a very common idea in Chassidus, that when we talk about our involvement in Yiddishkeit, doing a mitzvah, learning Torah, davening, whatever it may be, it has to be done with some level of passion, with some vitality, with some warmth. It is written, for the Lord your God is a consuming fire. The realm of holiness contains warmth and inspiration. However, klipa is coldness, cold, as it's written. He made you cold while you were on your path. This is the story of Amalek, right? It says, Asher karcha baderech. They made you cold. You just got out of Egypt. You just went through this. The sea was split, right? And Amalek comes and attacks. And what's their point? Their point is to try to cool you down from your passion. This is referring to the path of Torah and mitzvahs. There is, heaven forbid, no other path. The path of Torah and mitzvahs, this is the path. However, it could be cold, lacking warmth of holiness. So, and the Frierdiker Rebbe writes very much about this and about how our Yiddishkeit has to have a warmth and vitality. And now going to the Talmud Yerushalmi version of this discussion. So this discussion is discussed in Talmud Bavli and Baba Metzia, but it's also discussed in Talmud Yerushalmi, chapter 14, halacha 6. It states that all illness is a reference to burning. Burning. Now, heat also can be a problem. Generally speaking, this is the concept which the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya chapter 1. Anger and haughtiness come from the element of fire. These two characteristics, anger and haughtiness, burn a person. So they come from remember we spoke about the elements of earth, wind, fire, and water, right? We spoke above about wind, and now we're talking about Aish, fire. So what is the negativity of fire? The negativity of fire is a person becoming angry, a person being egotistical. So in physical terms, burning refers to fever, God spares, which is cold and heat at the same time. Spiritually speaking, this is coldness towards matters of Torah and mitzvahs and heat towards worldly matters, right? So when it comes to a discussion of a sport, how's the sports team doing? All of a sudden, you see somebody you saw him during davening, you thought he was going to pass out because he had no life or vitality whatsoever. During the rabbi speech, he fell asleep. But now during the Kiddush, now they're talking about the sports team, the Marlins. Is that a sports team in Florida? Or Miami Heat. Talk about heat, about fire, Miami Heat. All of a sudden, this is a person filled with vitality and such chayas, such life.
This is what it means when he says that heat and coldness at the same time. That's a person gets a fever with chills.
Right. Right. Now, Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov said, this is the power to conceptualize, that is, evil thoughts.
I don't think you skipped the paragraph.
In physical terms, we did this one. Coldness towards matters of Torah and mitzvahs, and heat towards worldly matters, right? That was the guy sleeping during the rabbi's speech and becoming excited when it comes to the platter of food at the Kiddush. All of a sudden, he comes alive. Look at this, it's an olive tapenade, and look at the lox, and then 3 types of lox, and this sauce, and that bagel, and that, right? Or now, right? Okay. We're all like that a little bit. That's okay. Shh, don't tell anyone. All I'm saying is that it's a reality that we need to deal with. You know, when it comes to food, I have a very simple fix, especially the Kiddush. The Kiddush to me is a time, the shul Kiddush. Has anyone here ever been to a shul Kiddush? Has anybody ever experienced a mad rush to the Kiddush, right? So this to me is a time, it's a potential for great character development. The Kiddush, that's where it's all at. You daven, you pray to Hashem, you learned. Now, are we serving Hashem? Are we becoming a better person? The Kiddush is, that's the litmus test. So it's very simple. When you come to Kiddush, before you take a plate, before you go and take food, make sure other people have. If you're standing in line at the buffet, have somebody else, maybe an older person or somebody with a need, ask them to go before you. There's somebody who isn't getting food, see if they need, see if they want, pass it around. Put aside your own food for 4 minutes. These 4 minutes transform you into a mensch. We can make a whole revolution, right? And, there's enough lox for everybody. Have you been to a Kiddush that there wasn't enough lox? I mean, maybe in the olden days, right? Maybe in the olden days. But today you go to Costco, you buy it, comes in double packages. If you have a big shul, you get several of them. There's enough lox for everybody. It's not like you even run out. In the olden days, I can understand. Today, you won't run out. And what if you do run out, right? That's the worst thing that'll happen. You didn't get any lox. It's not so terrible, but really the Kiddush, this is the time to become a mensch. You go to the Kiddush table, you think about somebody else at the Kiddush table for 4 minutes.
Really?
I'm not saying not to eat any food. For 4 minutes, take 4 minutes. I'm saying this is transformative. This is a transformative time. Yes, Moshe, please.
Rabbi, it almost seems like, on Shabbos, before it's even over, people are running to the Kiddush table, and it almost seems like there's a bunch of behemoths sitting there, and you can't even permeate the table where the food is. It almost seems like that.
They can't what?
No, it's almost like a bunch of behemoths
Right.
at the table there, and everybody's helping themselves, and nobody else can get through. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And one feels that if you don't get in there, there's not going to be anything left.
right? So what I'm saying is that help somebody else, right?
Rabbi?
Somebody else. Bruce, you have a different point of view, please.
Well, in a way, I do.
Good.
At my temple, we have the Kiddush every week, sponsored by somebody. But the biggest problem that I find out is that the parents don't care. They let their kinder rush up to the tables and just take whatever they want without being there. And it's a mess.
Yeah.
Literally a mess.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. I
And
mean,
the worst part about this is, and it's just my point of view, is that the rabbi doesn't say anything to the parents. Let the parents do what they want.
the rabbi is fulfilling a mitzvah,
Yes.
Talmud. You know what the mitzvah is in the Talmud? It says that just like there's a mitzvah to say words that will be listened to, so too there's a mitzvah not to say words that will not be heeded. So the rabbi is simply fulfilling that mitzvah. The problem, the parents do need to be, unfortunately, this is an issue of child rearing. The real issue is not the rabbi. The real question is what kind of human beings, what kind of human beings are these children going to turn into due to no fault of their own? But they were just lacking just a little bit of discipline that could make them into a mensch.
Correct.
But that's that is an issue for which I would strongly suggest that you don't say anything to the children, and you certainly don't touch them. And the oldest,
I don't.
There was a time.
And then there's one more thing as well, is that I'm kind of old school, and in New York, where I'm from originally, if during the services, the people or members of the congregation decide that they want to have a talk. If you want to talk to each other, in my opinion, you go outside of the temple and you talk.
Is that what they would do at work?
Well, you are disturbing the other members of the congregation who want to daven and who want to pray.
Right.
And you can't do that when you're doing what you're doing and you're hearing other people over you.
So what you're saying is that if you want to talk to another person and you're in shul, just say, hey, let's just step outside for a moment. Let's catch up.
Exactly.
I think that's a great idea.
Also,
Because I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, David. 1 second. In that same temple that I used to go to in New York, if you were talking when the rabbi or the chazan was doing what they have to do, they would stop and say, do you want to share this with the rest of the congregation? And they stop.
Right. But no lashes. They didn't give lashes.
No. No, I mean, they know better, but they do what they want to do.
All right. Anna has been
I think it's wrong.
Anna,
Can I ask you a question? It just goes back to the beginning of our class.
Sure.
You mentioned to all of us that sometimes it is definitely negative or sometimes even aggressive thoughts that people have in regard of someone who maybe did some wrong things or maybe even hurtful to others or yourself. It is, I'm sure it's very natural and normal for everyone to have these feelings. I always have an afterthoughts where it makes me feel extremely disappointed in myself, or upset that, feelings like that, sometimes feelings that, I want to hurt you because you're so wrong, you're doing so much harm to others. But, is it any type of suggestions or explanation of it?
Of why it happens or how to deal with it?
How to deal with it more? No,
Well,
why it happened, I understand. We are all human and we have different feelings.
so number one, first of all, realize what's happening and realize, okay, I'm letting another person live rent free in my head. Okay, what can I do about it? The best thing to do is to, whenever any negative thought, whether it's this type of a thought or an angry thought or a hurtful thought or a lustful thought, whatever is a thought that we shouldn't be having, the best advice is change the channel. That's the amazing thing about the mind. The mind, just things can pop in, right, and start preoccupying it. But the good news is you can change the channel. And you should have different things and say, okay, I'm going to think. You can immediately think about someone else. About something else, rather. You don't even need the remote. You don't even have to get up off the couch to change the channel or anything, right? You can, and that's the best advice regarding thinking. Better if you can think about a class, a sheer, a concept, an idea, but even something, something else about how a larvae becomes, how a caterpillar becomes a butterfly. That would work, right? There's so many.
That's distraction is the best medicine.
Yeah,
That's what you're
in the
suggesting.
mind, it's the best
Now,
thing.
but now in regard of fanatical believers or people who make, their own idols out of stars in sports world or art world or performers or anything like that. In many cases, it's considered a positive kind of side of character. Oh, he's so dedicated. Oh, look at that. He is willing to sacrifice this, that, and pay a very expensive price for a ticket. Or it shows their dedication. It shows that they have good feelings about specific, like, for example, performer or art or something like that. How do you really make a difference between, when it becomes an obsession and it's a normal dedication? I know it's kind of more a psychiatry.
Here's the thing, Anna. Really, my point of bringing this up was entirely not for us to judge people who are doing this. So
Mhm.
I think we're talking about other people, and we really have to not judge other people who are doing this one way or the other. That's the best thing to do, and to say that's what they're into. Okay, it's not prohibited. It's not my world, and that's what they're into, and we shouldn't be judging anybody one way or the other. And I can't believe they spent this kind of money on this or that, and it's not my business. It's not my money. It's not my business. Right?
It is not really about judging, because I'm sure for all of our classmates, we're at the age where, the outside is not as important as just judging yourself or trying to analyze what is your involvement, what is your point of view. How did you feel about this? Oh, okay. Yes, you absolutely love this piano performer, but is it really someone who's supposed to be an idol at this point, or become a star without any negative, or it's more about your own attitude to that than for what other people, I'm to be honest with you, it really would not bother me at all. It's just how I feel about this is a little bit worry for me.
Right. Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, you can see somebody playing the piano, or for that matter, in sports, somebody throwing a ball or catching a ball or making a move that I think is very, very impressive. I'm amazed. I'm not going to idolize. I'm going to say, wow, that is an amazing play. That is an amazing piece. That is amazing work of art, right?
But I'm talking about jealousy in general, considered a very negative
Yes.
feelings, a very negative effect that it makes on your character. But in many cases, it could be a motivation. I don't know. It's just
Well, it
something that I.
says in the Talmud that when you, it says, Kinas Sofrim Marbe Chachma, that when you have jealousy of your fellow scholar, it increases knowledge.
Yeah, that's right. It's not actually as bad. That everything
In-
usually has
In that,
light and dark sides.
in that,
Okay. Thank you.
good
That's right. Hopefully, I'm doing something right.
all right.
Thank you.
I was going to respond to
you.
something that Bruce
Thanks.
said.
Uh-huh.
He said that the rabbi doesn't say anything. So in the Chumash, there's a parsha called Shoftim, and it says Shoftim v'Sotrim. There's judges and policemen, and it's two different categories. There's the judges to make the judgment, and it's for the policeman. The rabbi doesn't have to go around the shul and tell everybody, "You be quiet, you be quiet." He's the judge, and there has to be a gabbai. There has to be policemen that enforce the rules. It's not for the rabbi to go around the shul, and that's why it's two different
Dave,
categories.
you're so right, because it can be not only physical, it could be spiritual. It could be a judge and it could be a policeman. That's something that you probably deal with inside of yourself, of your own decisions and your own feelings. Thank you. That's a really, really good comparison.
All right.
Okay, this one I could use and this one I completely not. Okay, thank you so much. Thanks.
We could go another half hour, Rabbi, easily.
You know what? I can leave you guys on if you want to continue discussing. I don't.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I think I got the idea. Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you
Rabbi.
so much. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Yashikam.
Bye bye.